Good evening. This is the North Andover Finance Committee meeting of Wednesday, March 2024. I'd like to bring it to order. And the first order of business is to stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so for those of you who are wondering, I am Chris Allen. I am the vice chair. Donovan O'Connor is out of town, so I'll be running the show this evening. First up is public comment, and I really don't see anybody here to do public comment, so I guess we're not going to do that. And before I get to the point where I might forget it, I just want to say that our next scheduled meeting was scheduled for Tuesday, which is Election Day, and we cannot have a meeting on Election Day. So that is going to be changed. I don't know when it's going to be changed to, so I just wanted to make sure that everybody had that before I forgot to say that. So we've got a couple of presentations. The first that I'd like to hear from is our Finance Director, Lynn Savage. And she's going to just run us through a little bit about the shared services because we had a lot of questions last meeting. And so I'll let you give whatever you want to present, and then we'll pepper you with questions.
I'll just explain to you what's in the shared services.
That would be
There's
great.
4 different departments that are in the shared services, which is basically the term shared services realizes it's shared between municipal and the school. So it's the audit, it's the purchasing department, it's the IT department, and facilities. So the changes that Melissa and the town manager has implemented and we're putting through this year is moving all of, because we try to become a lot more efficient, save money, moving all of the utilities and facility maintenance into facilities budget in the shared services. So basically what we did is we pulled all of these costs out of every department, including the town departments, school department and town, and put them all into facilities, which if you look in the budget has a tremendous increase for facilities. I mean, it's, you look at the percentage and people say, why is such a big increase? That's why. And it's going to be a cost savings for us because in theory, all of the contractors that we hire to do the electrical, the HVAC, the plumbing, all of these different services, we are now looking to hire 3 new positions to pull in-house, to do the electrical in-house, the plumbing in-house, and in the HVAC. And we did an analysis between the costs that we've paid for these services last year compared to what we would have to pay new employees is a huge savings. And it will also, bring the service in a lot quicker. So that's basically what shared services is for. Audit is, the audit is for everybody. The purchasing, our purchasing agent, which is Laurie Burzloff, the assistant town manager, as well, does all of the purchasing and reviews the contracts, does the bidding and all of that, and works with the school department really close on that. And then IT, we have all the IT staff under the municipal department, which is run by John.
Now, in the IT,
Yep.
that was one of the things that I just questioned about whether that was shared with the school or not. So is there portions of that are, or?
There is, I think, 3 or 4. There used to be 4. There might only be 3 now because we might have a vacancy. School employees are designated specifically to the school, and then we have our staff over here, but
Okay.
it all falls under this
So they
budget.
have an IT person which is assigned just to the school. I mean, that the
Yep,
school is
yep.
within the school budget.
Correct.
Is their hire person? Okay, that
Yep,
makes sense
yep,
that they had.
yep.
But like, they
Which
just
is Mike Grant, I
exactly
believe.
yes.
Yes.
They're lucky to have them, so that's
Yes.
great.
He works
But I
really
see in here they have equipment technology and
Yep.
equipment technology replacement. They have it within their budget. Is that something that has been moved into the shared? This is before the shared stuff was taken out.
Well, we have the capital, so we have the separate capital. We have school IT capital for
Yep.
equipment, and then the town. And then, yes, a portion of the town expenses in here pays for some of the network software over at the school department. There's various things that flow through this budget as well.
But it makes sense that they have 2 items in here that say equipment technology?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So
it
that should
does.
be, okay.
Yeah, and
Okay,
it
good.
hasn't, and actually, we didn't make any changes really to the IT budget?
Yeah.
Those changes were made several years
Yeah,
ago?
right, I knew that, I just
Yeah.
wasn't really clear on
Yep.
what was
Yep.
what, so that makes sense.
We're trying to make it a little bit more streamlined and more efficient throughout a lot
Yeah.
of different departments.
Yeah.
Like moving to the IT department, we moved all the copiers, we moved all the phone services.
Yeah.
Other than the school keeps their own copiers and their own phone services because they have so many. and-
Yeah.
And they're all over the place.
Right,
You know, and
right.
they track them, but I think they manage that cost
Yeah,
well enough.
Yep.
It's just grabbing the costs of all these other utilities and things like that, because there's a lot.
do you see a difference in the heating fuel, having that all bundled?
We won't know, and this will be the first year like
Yeah,
this, so we
so
really
you'll
won't
find
know
out.
that. We'll track it pretty closely to make sure that we're getting, staying on top of it. And this
Okay.
way, we can control the budget as well. We won't move anything out of it, and if we can pay attention to it, determine whether we're budgeting too much.
Yeah.
We don't know where it's in such a large budget at the school, and they have so many accounts.
Yeah.
Whether streamlining it and putting it into one budget, we can control it better.
Does anyone have any specific questions?
Yes, sorry. But, so to be clear, the utilities budget and the heating will not be in the school budget? It will
Correct.
be in,
100%
presented
into the
was not-
facilities budget,
Okay.
yes. And it had already been moved, if you look at the digital budget book,
Version, okay.
it's in there, and you can look in the detail.
yeah, we were looking at a spreadsheet, but where'd that spreadsheet
Yeah,
come from?
well,
So if you're in the
from
digital
Jim.
budget book under each department, it's a spreadsheet, but it's not open. You have to click on it to open it, and it brings you every line item detail that's in every single
Yeah.
budget.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just wondering where I got that spreadsheet. I thought I got it from the budget book, but maybe I must have gotten it from Jim.
I mean, I think it was just included in the packet,
Yeah.
to be perfectly
Okay.
honest with you.
And I just gave Chris the
She-
the
she gave me
spreadsheet
some-
of what was actually moved.
Yeah.
The total. and
So
the
we can make
breakdown
sure
per
that this is
category.
shared. But if you can go, just go online, I mean, we can go within the town's budget and see the
Yep.
school portion of it, that's a really wonderful way to view it.
Yeah, because the school, there is no utilities.
And that's
listed in
another
the
thing,
school.
I was having a conversation with Lynn earlier, just so, because you all were here, that the school budget that was voted on is the corrected, appropriate budget. So it will be in front of town meeting, in the
At
correct,
lower
in the
amount,
correct
which
form.
is
So
62 million.
we don't have to worry that something needs to be changed. It doesn't. So
Yep.
that's good to know. I really appreciate you clearing that up for us, so. Because we were a little bit like, I don't understand, but
Right.
this is good. Well, it's a pretty.
Yeah, that would have been a major adjustment on the floor. 'cause I don't
It's
think it
a
would have went through.
significant change. It's like it's over 1.6 million
Right.
that's been moved. So actually, it's great.
And
It's
if you
great that
recall
it's a
with
shift.
Melissa's presentation that she had given, if you saw it on the Board of Selectmen, and I think she did come to the Finance Committee and did a presentation too.
Yes.
She explained that the original increase to the school budget was 5.5% over last year.
Yeah.
But that was the original number, and then once we decided and worked on moving all of these costs out, it brought that percentage down to like 3-something.
Yep.
And she wanted everybody to understand that they did get 5.5.
Right.
But because we moved this out, it brought it down to 3, and we didn't want anybody to be deceived by the comments in the transmittal letter that
Yeah.
said they got a 5.5% increase when the graphs and the charts
Yeah.
and the worksheets don't show that.
Yeah, well, first year around, it is confusing.
It
For
is.
some of these
Yes.
because it's a big shift. So,
Correct. It definitely is.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, no, that's good. And that I feel a little bit better at.
So how much total shifted, 1.6 million?
Yep.
Yeah,
For schools specifically?
Yep,
here.
for their utilities, yep.
There it is,
and
right there.
facilities
If you wanna
costs.
Look at it.
And we can share that. So, all right. Anybody else have any other questions?
I just wanted to confirm, the printer that does all the translations, is that coming out of these shared services now? Where does that sit?
I'm not really sure on that. The one that we have in the copy rooms, you mean?
I don't know if it's in the copy room, I'm not sure where it's housed, but it's the printer that will do all the translations, I think.
Correct, you feed something
Yeah.
and it translates.
Yep.
It probably comes out of IT, I would say.
Okay.
Yes, they purchased it and they paid us.
Yeah, Dr. Gilligan's favorite new toy. Sounds
me?
so
Like
cool.
the cell phone bills,
Yes,
Are coming
all
out
the
of
cell
IT?
phone bills come out of IT,
the
yes.
schools as well, or they?
No, the school keeps their own.
Okay.
Yep, yeah.
Yeah, it was, they said, I remember when we were talking to them, they didn't have a lot of individual cell phones that
Yeah.
were on the town's tab or the school's tab, so. Anybody else? Anybody feel a little better about this? Okay, very much appreciated.
You're welcome, anytime.
If we have more questions, we'll be knocking at your door. But
Okay.
this is good. I
We only have
appreciate
4
it.
months left to do that.
Okay.
Sorry. I don't mean
Not
to.
counting down the days.
Oh, no.
Listen to you. What are we going to do,
I know.
huh? What are we going to do?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All righty then. Next up, we are going to have a presentation from the Community Preservation Committee. We've got Chair Bill Callahan with us, and he's going to lead us through all the awesome things that that portion of our budget gets to provide for us.
Great, thank you.
Because it's awesome, right, Bill?
Thanks for having me tonight. Unfortunately, I can't get this to be up on the display because I don't have the right connection. I don't know if anybody else has if someone else had an HDMI connection, plug in on their computer, I could email it and you could throw it up that way. But,
I think I do. Email it to me.
okay.
You'll have to, what's the email address?
Yeah. Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
I think that'll be helpful.
Oh,
Then
yeah.
everyone can
You
look
can
at the
just
same
bring
thing.
it right over to you, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
I think it's in the,
Yeah, it's in the
folder.
folder. The only problem is I can't access the pages
You can, there's a NA tablet Wi-Fi.
it's not the Wi-Fi, that's the issue. It's getting Gmail.
Oh, yeah, I hear you. You gotta log in.
You want to give me your
Drives
email?
me crazy.
Or-
It's okay, I can get
Sometimes.
my email on my phone and forward it to another email.
Oh, okay.
Do you want to start and I'll work on pulling this up?
Sure. So I'll just talk. Why don't I talk in general for a little bit? And I had a couple things to talk about. So, as you may know, we adopted the Community Preservation Act in 2001. So this would make it like the 23rd year that we're a part of it. There are
Amazing.
199 communities who have adopted the CPA. We were one of the earliest in, so that's been to our benefit because over the years we've gotten a lot of state match, and the state match, the state funds have kind of stayed, fairly consistent. There's an addendum on sort of real estate transactions, and we're always, the state association of CPA is always trying to get more sort of funds for the state match. But
What is the match now?
so the match now is around 20% or so. So if
Wasn't
we
it
raise
a 0.5% to start?
the state match, I don't know where you get
Back in the day?
0.5%, but it was better
Yeah.
earlier years. Right now, it's we're getting about 700,000, and we raise about probably 2.5 million
Yeah.
through our own property taxes. So, it's somewhere in the 20,
Yep.
20 somewhere, as low as 17 and probably as high as 23. Sometimes it comes in a couple tranches based on the supplemental budgets and so forth. So it varies, but it's pretty good.
Yep.
The guidelines set out 3 major categories, and every year we need to either allocate 10% of our funds to each category. The 3 categories are open space / recreation. That was kind of expanded a little bit because initially it was more for strictly open space and passive recreation, and the law was amended so that it's a little bit more open, and that's how we're able to fund more things like playgrounds and ball fields and so forth. The second category is historic preservation, and the third category is affordable housing. And so for us, for this year, just to kind of round out that compliance bit, we are allocating more than 10% to each category. So, and if we weren't, then it's kind of segregated, and it sits as part of our savings, and we have to use it towards that purpose. So you couldn't you can't kind of not, allocate funds to be
So
used for
you
that.
put it in
over
the
time.
bucket for a future,
Right.
project,
A future,
yeah.
if we spent 5% on affordable housing, we'd have to take the balance, and leave it in the fund and spend it on affordable housing at some point.
Yep.
We couldn't spend it on another purpose.
yep.
So, can I ask a question? Is the 10% on the balance or on the new funds brought in?
On the new funds brought
On
in.
the new funds brought in?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. And so this year, I mean, last year, we did not spend a ton of money. I would say the last 2 years were fairly quiet in terms of, I mean, I should say quiet, but they were low dollar, relatively speaking.
Yep.
This year, we did have a lot of applications. And it's the first year since I've been involved when we really said, like, okay, there are going to be some hard choices this year.
Yeah.
And
Seemed like-
process-wise, we keep trying to push the process to finish earlier every year so that there's more time to sort of investigate things. So when we started our meetings back up in the fall in October, we basically had a public session, invited anybody who might be thinking about putting a project to come in. We had a few people come in for that sort of, kind of like a workshop, just so that we wouldn't get a bad application in February, because then there's not much you can do, if we're trying to get our recommendations done by March. So we had people in then. We also have had a notice of intent process for the past 2 years. And that's been, there we go. And that's been really helpful because the notice of intent has basically have people come to us in December and say, like, this is the project we're proposing in broad outlines.
Good job.
And then we're able to sort of have them in and give some feedback, and then they can put a more comprehensive proposal with feedback in for February.
How do you
So-
think that worked? I mean,
I think it works a lot better because,
Yeah.
like
I
I
mean-
said, if we have questions or information we want to get, they have time to go back and
Yeah.
talk to contractors if it's a project like that, or talk to address any sort of legalities or anything
Yeah.
like that. So there's a lot more ability. They have a lot more time to sort of craft it and figure out what's there. And we're doing a lot less guesswork, and we don't have to move things around. So let's say, for example, there was a project, 80% was totally fine and 20% wasn't. We don't have to say no to the whole project or try to carve it up ourselves.
Yeah.
They can sort of go back and
Represent.
and refine.
Yeah.
So it's worked really well.
Okay, that's great.
Great. So if we start with thank you for getting that up. We start with the total fund balance. This page is all in thousands, and I did that on purpose because there's a lot of estimation in there, on the projected revenue, which I tried to be conservative about, but I also want to convey a sense of accuracy that's not there yet because, it's dependent on tax revenue and state match and interest rates and so forth, a lot of variables that will come into play. So, long story short, right now our fund is sitting at 17.3 million. Of that, we have encumbrances, and that's projects that we've approved, but we haven't spent the money yet because the money comes out when we get the bills, get the invoices for it. So the most notable one, as you can see on sort of open space, most of that is the Recplex that we funded, several years ago, and that'll be part of the story again tonight. But that's the biggest outstanding sort of single item. And then there's lots of projects over time that just go more slowly. And things we approved last year, most of that money hasn't gone out yet. And some projects, kind of, progress over time. So long story short, we have about 10 million encumbered. In other words, we can't spend it. We have about 7 million that is undesignated. And then when I look towards fiscal year 25, long story short, I was very conservative in all these estimates. I got some from Lynn and some from prior years, but our main source of revenue is the 3% surcharge on property taxes. And that's probably usually over about 2.5 million at least. But I was conservative and said 2.2. We have some state revenue coming in still. One kind of good news story about the fact that we've had a large balance and we haven't spent the money, especially on the Recplex, is that it's earning a much higher interest rate than it was 5 years ago. So that's become a substantial part of our revenue, is interest income. And so basically, I said let's start and say we have $10.7 million to think about when we think about fiscal year 25. So any questions on sort of the broad picture? Yes.
Quick question on things that are encumbered. Do we go back at a certain point in time if something was allocated to a project and didn't happen for
100%.
3 years and we say,
Right.
oh, let's unencumber that? It's obviously not happening for
Right.
whatever reason.
So I also want to give a lot of credit to Zach Melcher, the new town planner. That's what we do every fall, and we've actually put in a more robust process. We're trying to, I'm trying to get it to the point where it's automated, where everybody who has a project should report once a quarter. They should get like an automatic email saying like, do you have any invoices? What do you expect to spend next quarter? You know, are there any roadblocks? Anything we need to know? Or like sometimes projects do finish and just have an outstanding balance, and we close those out, and then that money falls back to the bottom line and is unencumbered again.
Great.
So we do that every fall. We probably closed like 15 projects, and there are some projects that are still sort of, like probably the best example is the mill, Schofield Mill, right? Like that's 350,000 that, it's still kind of sitting out there, and we have to figure out what to do because, the town has to come back and say what the next steps are.
Yeah.
Because it's unclear if that's enough money or what the next steps are. But that's kind of a good example of one of those situations. But we do try to come back, and sometimes $1 million project might have an $80,000 balance, and some smaller projects might have smaller, but we close those out every year and get them back. And like the affordable housing, they're just finishing down by Grogan's Fields. I can't remember the name of it's called like the veterans housing or the family housing.
Right, yeah.
That project is coming to completion, and that was a big portion of the affordable housing. So I'm approving a lot of invoices for that as they get through, and that should be finished up very soon. Okay, and then on the column on the chart to the right, I put in all the projects that we have this year, and it's about 2.4 million plus the bonding for the Recplex. And because we're going to bond it, so I'll explain this and I'll explain it again, but because we're going to bond it, there won't be any payment this year. So it's like, your first payment won't come due for a full year. So it's not money we're going to be spending in fiscal year 25, but in 26, 27, 28, et cetera. So we can sort of move on from that. So, the committee was pretty comfortable with spending, a little less than what we're taking in, overall this year, and understanding the Recplex, which we'll talk about later, as like an ongoing expense over the next 10 years that we'll have to deal with, and trying to be ready to have some sort of a balance if any of large parcels in town come up or any open space things that could be more expensive. So
I watched a couple of your meetings, and you've said that a couple of times.
Yeah.
Our members have talked about that. Is there any, are there things that you know about or on your radar? It's come up a few times.
Barker's Farm and
Oh,
Calzetter's
okay.
Farm are both sort of on our radar.
Okay.
So I would say as larger
Yeah.
parcels.
Okay, that's interesting. Cool. Okay.
Okay, we can, and then I'll just explain a little bit of 3 projects we didn't recommend. The library north lawn, we approved the design work from that last year. The amount came back at about $763,000. And basically the committee, I think, overall, asked them to come back with a rescoped proposal that was, more like under $500,000 or something, a little bit closer. That's what the committee felt like overall. And they came in early, and we kind of held on that, it wasn't, and also like we couldn't do everything this year. Like we just couldn't. The historic bell may come back in a few years. I don't know if any of you have heard the story, but they found a bell in the closet of the middle school that is inscribed and said it was somewhere from 1872, and apparently it was in the middle school courtyard for years, and then whatever was holding it up fell down, and they put it in the closet, and Steve Foster found it and wants to restore it, which is great. Nobody knows from where the bell came, so they have to do the historic commission is doing some more research to try to figure out what it's doing, and the kind of the difficult part is the historic stuff is very specific to rehabilitation. So if you said the bell was in the structure and the structure had started to fall down, you could rehabilitate the structure. But you can't kind of make this Taj Mahal structure to hold an old thing. So it's a little bit trickier. So it might take a little while to come back on that one. So we said, like, A, we got to figure out if it's historic, and B, we got to figure out, like, what we'd be restoring. And then the third one was
Remember the bell.
a worthy project from the Historical Society to digitize the North Andover Citizen. It was not a lot of money, but the laws are pretty specific about rehabilitation. So, like, in other words, if you had, like, archived materials you wanted to preserve as archived, that would qualify, but digitization does not. But we were also able to find out that there are, and we'll pass, I will get that done this week. We did get a resource from the Community Preservation Coalition that basically there are state funds for that. So hopefully you can direct them there and they can get funding there. So any questions on those?
General question, do you start with a sort of a dollar figure in mind as to what you will approve?
Yeah, we had that discussion.
You kind of know what's going to be
Yeah.
coming in for revenue, right?
Yeah, we had that discussion this year and basically said, like, what's our do not exceed?
Okay.
And we were like somewhere around 2.5 was where we came in. All right. And now I can kind of go through the projects, or actually first, spending by category. This is to kind of show the different categories everything fell into. Open space and recreation was the largest this year. I just to show the scope, I put the first year's payment in, just bond payment, because it would be kind of artificial to say, like, we're not spending anything this year on the Recplex. We really are, because we're directing the revenue there. So affordable housing at 17% and historic preservation at 19%. So it's an open space year.
Yeah.
I can start. Affordable housing, we had 2 projects. The Affordable Housing Trust and Bread and Roses came forward with a great project to do 4 affordable housing units at 14 to 16 Brown Court, which is actually probably right like 100 yards behind Miss Allen's head. It's right behind the hall, tucked in back there, downtown. The overall project is north of $2 million. We're contributing $500,000, so we're excited about that. 4 units. We're excited. Bread and Rose is always a great partner. So, and the next one for the Housing Authority, they're requesting $75,000 for the design of standby power systems at the Folds Terrace and O'Connor Heights senior disabled housing complexes.
So overdue.
Yeah, so definitely needed, and what they've been doing generally is kind of like a community room, any emergency stuff, and then having a community room that could stay cooled and people could use if the complex goes down. And we know that's kind of been more common than not lately.
Yeah.
And we have them at 2 other complexes, so we'll keep going on that. And they'll come next year for the installation, which is $225. So they have to do it in 2 stages because they got to get it designed first.
Okay.
Then historic preservation. This is definitely the most controversial project we had. The restoration of the 1836 Meeting House, also known as North Parish Church. And they have about close to $800,000 worth of work that they want to get done. And I'll start just talking a little bit about this. I'll talk about this as a historic project because it is, and that's how we approved it. And so if you look at it, the first thing we do whenever we get a historic project is to say, like, what's the historical, is the building or structure or historically significant? And so North Parish Church, also known as the 1836 Meeting House, is definitely historically significant. It's on the National Historical Register. There's the Paul Revere bell inside. It definitely has great historic significance to the town. It was, part of the town's founding, the reason why, the split from Andover and all those things. So yes, it met that test. So the way I like to think about it is, like, if this is a project in a historic building with that sort of history, we would definitely say it should be funded. And then the controversy comes in terms of it being, a house of worship with an active congregation and uses. And so we've been talking to them for years. We also had applications in the previous 5 years from St. Paul's Episcopal Church and from the Trinitarian Church for different projects. And what I would say is there was a major court decision in 2019 involving it's called the Acton decision. It was handed down by the Supreme Judicial Court in Massachusetts. And basically it said the town of Acton acted improperly when it funded a historic renovation of a church in Acton. And specifically they talked about it and basically laid out a pretty complex set of 3 factors to analyze when you're looking at any funding inside a religious building. And so what we did is, in working with the applicant, is we said, like, okay, go back, read the Acton decision, read what lawyers have been saying about the Acton decision over the past few years, because they've come to us for a few years, and try to craft a proposal that takes into account and passes legal muster with this. And so they did. And first I'll talk about what they did, and then I'll talk a little bit about town council's analysis, which I may even pull up and take a second to look at. And I could certainly forward on if anyone had a question about it. But long story short, they had started a 501c3 to hold basically all the funds that are involved in the maintenance and repair of the building. So it's a 501c3 set up as a nonprofit organization that can accept, I guess churches, it's different than a church status, but it would allow you, it's like a charitable 501c3, you can write it off on your taxes, and they can collect donations from people who want to fund the preservation of the building, who may be from outside the congregation or just think it's a nice building. They form that, and they try to basically segregate costs, the costs that go into the meeting house versus the cost of running the congregation and so forth. So that was an important factor in sort of the 3-factor test. And then we had town council, Christine O'Connor, look at it very closely and sort of analyze their proposal. And what I would say is they were very good in their proposal about segregating funds that were about sort of historic purposes. So for example, and also involved in sort of the exterior, right? So to give a good example, right, like we wouldn't pay for like new pews in the church, right? We wouldn't pay for a new altar. We wouldn't pay, and this came up in the Acton decision, for stained glass, which, might have great artistic value and be worthy of preserving, but is definitely like a religious, part of the religious activity of the church. So when we're talking about this, we're talking about the exterior, the bell tower, window glazing, not, stained glass or anything, and painting, sort of the exterior to make it more weatherproof. They showed us a lot of pictures. They even had some like drone footage of what's going on at the top of the bell tower, and it's not in good shape. So that was sort of a big part of it, of the analysis. And I'll pull up the 3-factor.
That's not your computer.
I know. I'm just going to look at it because I can't remember the 3 factors.
Don't forget.
Yeah. So long story short, she did a very careful analysis and sort of looked through everything and said to the committee, you know what, like, you would be okay to approve what they've asked for. And so we had a long conversation about it. We were nearly unanimous in it. And really the main reason we weren't 100% unanimous is there was some sentiment to say, like, now that we've sort of got a pathway for religious organizations, should we say, like, okay, we'll start this next year? In other words, we would go out to everybody who's applied, maybe in a religious organization, and say, like, you can apply for next year. Or should we, approve this and tell everybody else, if you want to get funding for a project in a historic church, this is the way you should do it, and follow their lead. And so we decided on the latter because, like the way costs are rising and just the time factor and so forth, we figured it was better for them to sort of get going, and we could always go out and, get the other groups to come forward in this, in the next year. All right. And so the 3 factors are, whether a motivating purpose of each grant is to aid the church. All right, and so when Ms. O'Connor looked at this, she said, since they segregate the building from the church activities, right, it's not aiding the church, it's aiding the building. The second part is a little bit tougher. It says, will the grant have the effect of substantially aiding the church? And so this was kind of saying, you could imagine an evangelical group, right? If they were able to get the town to pay for their church and they could spend more money evangelizing, we would be aiding a religious endeavor. And so, when we looked at that, one of the things that we thought about, and one of the points that the applicants made is they said, hey, if we were just we're not trying to expand our religious activities. We just happen to be located inside a historic building. If we were in a more utilitarian building that was in better shape, we wouldn't be devoting, this big share of our costs to maintaining this building, because too, with all the historic preservations and so forth on it, they have to maintain the original character of the building. There'll be conservation restrictions on what they can and can't do.
They have a lot of restrictions.
On that building. We're going to add another 35 years, so I think it'll take it to 2080, so, it'll be our kids and grandchildren who will, the historic preservations will still be there. So, essentially what we said was, okay, it passes that one. And then the third point was, whether the grant avoids the risk of political and economic abuses that prompted the passage of the anti-aid amendment. That's the part of Massachusetts law that came into play. Will this create some sort of an entanglement between church and state? And they decided that didn't. Also, I should add that, the Friends of the Meeting House have also demonstrated a willingness to have the community and have had events to allow the community into the church to see the historic preservation. They run a food pantry from there. They have a lot of outside groups using it for meetings, and want to continue to do that. And so basically, I think she said, at the end, a good sentence I'll read is that all of the improvements may be seen and enjoyed by all members of the public. The applicant is a non-for-profit group with a secular mission, and the nature and scope of the work tips heavily towards historic preservation rather than the advancement or aid of religion. So, I know this is, controversial, but we felt like we put a lot of time and effort into making sure we got it right.
Yeah.
So any questions on that one?
That was a tough one for you. I appreciate the time and effort that goes into it. Because, my gut feeling is oh my gosh, we can't let that fall down. That's like the postcard of North Andover, Seriously. Yeah, and you're what pictures do you show when you show the town? It's the sweeping, the common area and the church, and it's yeah, it would be devastating to have that. And so, for instance, if the congregation decided they couldn't stay there anymore because the building was coming down around them, they could relocate and be very successful. And we would be left with an historic building which was crumbling, if you want to look at it from that perspective, So props to you. I think that's great.
Props to whoever, wrote the application. It sounds like
Yes.
there's a lot
Yeah.
of creativity and inclusion of the public.
That's a lot of hard work.
Things
So.
like food pantries and public meeting places.
Yeah.
That really expands the sort of audience that can use the building,
Yeah.
the participants.
All right, well, we'll see how that goes, but that's
Okay.
great.
And then the next one, the applicant was the town, the Stevens Estates Stables. And so this is another phase of getting that building ready. And this is not a picture, the picture is actually of the estate and not the stables themselves. But are you guys all aware of it? It's sort of the outbuilding. Mm-hmm. It's been a long time. It's still evolving, but Steve Foster came in and said, this is the work we need to do this year to kind of get it shored up and watertight so that we can start to envision what the interior would look like. So I'm sure there'll be more projects coming on this because, it hasn't gone into design or anything, but this is just to keep it sort of from from deteriorating anymore. Basically, it's a lot of brickwork and sort of drainage to make sure that that it stays okay. So, any questions on that one?
Nope.
Okay. Open space and recreation.
This was the biggie.
The Recplex, right? And so, I'm sure as you've seen in the capital plan, Recplex price has gone up considerably since originally envisioned several years ago. And this portion of 5.9 million is for CPA allowed uses. It is actually right in the CPA legislation that you can't use CPA money for artificial turf. So that was out. I think there were some quibbles in the court case around some aspects, like the lighting or the bench or so forth. So we've all done the analysis on that, and 5.9 million is what the town manager and assistant town manager believe is rightfully can come from CPA, along with our earlier tranche of funding, which is somewhere around 6 million, I would say. And so, it's a big project with lots of fields, and I would say, definitely a very inclusive project. We have 2 members of the Fields Committee on our committee, Terry Holland and Rick Green, and they were talking about how there were 19 public meetings to sort of review that with everybody. So it was a long process, and has things for everybody. Walking paths, picnic areas, things for all ages. And as noted, the lawsuit has significantly delayed the project and increased costs, because construction costs have really skyrocketed since then. And any questions on that part, the project as a whole, and then I can talk a little bit about the bonding. So if you go to flip to the next page. Oh, you know what? I had the bonding. I'm sorry, this is not very clear. I made another slide in another version, but I didn't do it. So long story short, there was some back and forth between the committee and the town on what the best bonding schedule was, whether we wanted to go 5, 10, or 20 or 25 years. And we've aligned on 10 years. And the thought from the committee was, if we stretched it out too long, could it be seen as sort of an artificial way of keeping the CPA going longer than people might want to have kept it going? In other words, if we needed to pay out for 25 years, would that mean we're asking kind of a backdoor way to keep the CPA, surcharge and everything, that structure in place for 25 years? We talked about that for a long time. We also heard that, you could still get rid of it and, you could pay off the bond from residual funds, or if, let's just say we closed up shop and stopped the CPA, which I would not recommend at all. But if we did decide as a town to do that, that's town meeting's decision. They could pay off the bond with whatever funds were left, and then also keep kind of a residual tax to pay the bond proceeds. So in other words, the bond would still be paid, no matter what. But we decided 10 years was sort of safer. So, as you can see from the principal plus interest payments, we're borrowing close to $6 million, paying about $1.3 million in interest. So the overall cost of the town would be close to 7.2, and the payments would be, $826,000 in the first year, down to about $600,000 in the 10th year, and we decided that was a compromise we could live with. So as we think about it as a committee, it basically means, between 25 and 30% of our budget is sort of spoken for the next 10 years. Mm-hmm. We just know that that's sort of a built-in cost over the next time. And the town manager was also concerned, even though this bond, we think of it as this will be paid for by CPA money, the bond aiding agent, it would still be money borrowed by the town. It would still count against what we were borrowing. We're always trying to keep that at a,
Yeah.
under 5%. And so, we wanted to be careful and make sure we weren't, if we did it any shorter in a 5-year period, that could make the payments that much more sort of onerous. Even though it wouldn't be a problem to pay it, it would be a problem maybe for the bond agencies and affect our ability to fund other projects, whether they be school or field related down the road. So,
You could argue that both ways.
right,
Because it's a predictable source of income.
right.
And the houses aren't going anywhere in this.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's true. But I guess I would distinguish it from like the bond that the water department, that's paid for by a separate revenue stream, like if you funded like a new sewer and like everyone was going to get an assessment, then the bond, whoever was writing the bond would know, I'm getting those funds and they're coming from water payments and not sort of general obligation. So it's a little different. So long story short, that's sort of the schedule and based on, where we think interest rates will be. Maybe they'll fall, knock on wood, between now and then, and that would be good.
So do you think our town manager felt comfortable with this?
Yes, yeah, we're in agreement.
Okay.
The town manager and the committee are in agreement
Okay.
on 10 years.
So she didn't have an alternative scenario to fund it? She was good with this? Okay, great.
Right.
Good to hear.
Who's going to use it? Is it mostly the youth sports rather than sort of school sports?
No, it's everybody.
Everybody.
It's everybody.
It really is.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
It's
that's
walking
good.
paths and it's
Okay.
really,
Softball field.
yes.
Nice.
It is meant to
Yeah.
accommodate families with very young children and also our seniors.
Nice.
And not high school seniors, I mean the me's. I mean, walking paths and stuff like that, so.
I mean, I'm under the impression that there are the belief that property values are dependent on new people coming in, and what are new people coming in for, and who
Yeah.
are they demographically? It's
Right.
typically younger people, especially in a community like this, or growing families, and they're looking for, I think, number one, education. I fully believe that, and we do a great job with education. And the second thing is becoming more and more sort of recreational and sports, youth sports and such.
Yep.
And-
This
and
was really envisioned as a community
That's even better.
park, like a
That's-
park, if you're going to say
so-
we're building a park, but instead it's going to have all these recreational facilities built into it, so.
Yeah, and the only thing I'm trying to add here is that it appreciates property. It does, maybe indirectly, but it does.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
Yep, it's all good.
What is the schedule on when it's going to be happening now? Are the lawsuits we passed that, or not?
So, I don't want to
If
get
you
too
know, I
far
know it's-
beyond my expertise,
Yeah, I
but
know.
basically, at this point, there's one issue in court still being resolved, and it's
Okay.
whether the town had the right to issue, like, the special permit. They're basically suing the planning board. And, we had a very motivated litigant. And we had sort of a lawyer who was like also took it up as sort of a cause celeb, and has done this in other towns. But the town is ready to proceed at risk, and I would say, it will take years, and you have to have all the money in hand. So it's got to get through town meeting. You have to have all the money in hand before you can go out to bid. So I don't know, but I would bet that it would probably take 8 or 9 months before it's broken ground on, after town meeting,
Okay.
before we could really break ground and so forth.
Okay.
Because the bidding takes a long, long time.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right, next slide. This one was a nice project, I think. Patriots Memorial Park, next to the library. This is the North Andover Improvement Society. They also have kind of a subgroup of, they hold the monies for a group that is kind of taking care of the park and organizes volunteer days and so forth. And maybe does like the flags and so forth, maybe the wreaths and all that on the memorial. With the weather and also the changing climate, a lot of the trees have been affected by storm damage. We kind of had the drought 2 summers ago, and then all the crazy weather. And so they asked for $21,000. The town, they asked for $21,000 to restore the landscape to the Olmsted Brothers design from 1922. So it's kind of interesting because I was like, are you coming as historic or open space? we finally said like, well, it's outdoors, so we'll say it's, open space. But it's basically to rehabilitate the landscape and get it back to its intended design. So a pretty simple kind of good story I always like those stories of like somebody sees something in the community that needs help and picks up the baton. It's great.
They had a good presentation, too.
Yeah.
They did.
Yeah.
It's compelling.
And it's very similar to the next one, the lake access. So this again is kind of like average citizen who said like this lake access really doesn't work. Didn't know that he was going to take on like another job as like a designer and architect, and sort of there are lots of layers of complexity to it. So does everyone know where it is? Kind of behind Butcher Boy on Route 133. And so we have heard a little grumbling about the cost being really high. This is just a boat ramp. Well, it's really not just a boat ramp. It's our drinking water supply, which gets a whole layer of regulation involved in it. It's also on the state highway, so they had to get the state involved. And really what they found out was sort of the whole, it was an old pump station there, and all the walls and everything that sort of hold that up are falling apart. And it's not in good shape. The retaining wall and everything are not in good shape. So basically, when this is done, it will be really sort of a delightful park. There will be some more landscaping, a few parking spots. It'll still be a hand carry boat launch. They don't allow any motors on the lake, and they won't afterwards. But they'll reorganize the boat storage and kind of clean everything up and get it smoother and everything. Right now, I think you would pretty much bottom out driving across there. And so this is a good example where we took someone who had the idea and said, like, I want to do this, and asked for some money up front. And this is the third year in a row we're funding. So we funded like kind of a preliminary design, and then the design and permitting, and now this is for the construction, and it's $983,000. And actually the estimate that he got, pretty close to the beginning of the process, or at least, a few years ago, was pretty close to that. So we're pretty happy about that, and the harbor master's been closely involved, and lots of different people. So I think it's a good story.
Yeah.
And then there's one more that didn't make it on here.
Oh, really?
And it's from the town, and it's the town bandstand.
Yeah.
And so this was brought up a little bit of consternation. So right now the bandstand is in pretty bad shape. Potentially not, the building inspector looked at it and said, like, this is in bad shape and we need to fix it. And essentially, they've gone out and said, like, what we're going to do, and the committee said, we're going to fund like a 600 square foot replacement of the exact bandstand in concrete. And we don't have a good picture of it. Like, even my presentation, like, we could not find a picture of just a bandstand that was just sort of, it's going to be 18 inches high and made of concrete, but we don't have like a design done or anything, or I should say, not me, the town doesn't. And so we don't have like a great visual, but the basic idea is to replace what's there that's wooden, that isn't working, with something that's concrete that will work, and work with, and they worked with Rich Gorman to kind of figure it out and what people need. It has a little power for people to plug in amplifiers or speakers or whatever. And they're
It's a little bit larger, too, than the
a
existing
little bit,
one.
yeah. But, overall, it's 600 square feet is what we approved,
Yeah.
which is only slightly larger.
Yeah, well, I just remember Lori Bursloff's presentation said that it was like a little bit too small. For the groups that got on it, it was always an issue to be safe on the platform with what they had up there. It happened enough that making it slightly larger made sense. I think it's a great project.
So this is the one in the common.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
it gets a lot of use,
Yeah, for all the summer concerts and everything. And then they're going to go, essentially, pending the funding, they're going to go to the old center group for, approval and work with them on design. So nobody has like a fixed design in mind. It's more like, a general thing. But we were like, we could wait another year, but like, it's not like a very complex sort of structure or anything. So it was kind of like, why should we wait another year for you to design this when it's a more immediate need. And that's just things move kind of slowly in the municipal world. So we were like, we don't want to slow it down. So that's 210,000.
That's great.
And that's it.
That's great. Anybody have any questions about any of the projects, or? No?
So I'm just curious for this lake access one, you'd said an individual raised that idea, which is awesome. I love that. I'm just curious, does that mean that person is responsible for like getting it
No.
implemented, or do we get like a project manager to do that?
No,
or
so
something?
so the town will.
Okay, the town will take on the
Yeah,
project.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
good. I was gonna say, geez, that's a lot on one
This
person.
poor
to, like,
person,
deal
what
with
have I
that
done?
massive project.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, no, it was, I should pull the application up. Let me just pull the application up because I thought it was so good, and I should remember his name. It was a pretty amazing thing, I thought.
All of the projects seem to have a fairly significant community benefit,
Yeah.
really.
Great projects.
Yeah, I mean, that people just, go to these places and see them and use them and,
So they could be better.
and say they could be
Right.
better, or let's not have them broken. You know,
Right, so it
like,
was
you're right.
Ted Kelly, and then he's working with John Borghese from the DPW to sort of make it. So,
Okay, well,
Ted came at a few years ago to the committee and just said, "This is my idea." And he had some number. I
Yeah.
think he's a general contractor, or at least has construction experience, and so
so we had a clue,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
got it through.
All right, is there anything you need from us?
No, thank you.
No, we appreciate you coming, really, very much. It's super helpful, and really
Great.
informative, so,
And you tell a lot of work went into this.
Yeah.
So thank you and your team for going through this.
Yeah, no, it was a really good year. I mean, I think we had like 8 out of 9, all the weeks, and it made it go really well. So
yeah. No, I watched the 2 meetings with the presentations. I don't think I watched your meeting where you voted on it, but it's, of all meetings that you watch, actually, that's an interesting meeting. Because they talk about the project, so.
great. Well, thank you.
Great job.
Good
Thank
luck
you,
in the
Bill.
rest of your process.
All righty then. Okay, and Donovan put next on this discussion of the Finance Committee letter. This is just ongoing about, do you all feel comfortable about what you've been assigned to do? I know he did include the executive summary in the packet, so you can give an example. Keith has already submitted his. Go, Keith. Yeah, I got an email today, and to be honest, all I did was copy paste and stick it in my files. I haven't even read it.
We are, yeah. When does it do? Do we have dates?
I don't know.
I was gonna
That
ask
was my
that as
question
well.
too,
I don't know. Let's find out, and we can at least email that to committee. I don't think that's a problem with us sharing a due date. Okay, let's find out the due date. Yeah, that's why I'm the vice chair. Don't know the due date.
And I think I did notice on the shared drive that we have the Word version now
Yeah, we do.
of the whole thing. So
Yes,
we can.
I think that's what
if we
that's
start
what
with
this
that-
is the Word version is that
Yeah,
he put
so
up
if
there.
we
Yes.
start with that, then it'll be the right format
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
everything else.
And then like basically what it is like, even if you don't have your formatting, I'm going to do all that to make them all the same, so you
Yeah,
don't have
but
to
we
worry
should
about
just-
that so
if
much.
we all start with that.
This is true. It
then
does.
it'll be less work for you.
It does make it easier. Well, I so much appreciate
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
But you just send me what you got, and I'll just start cobbling it together, and, so, this is good. Okay.
In general, we kind of keep with the formats that we've done in the past.
Well,
But
it's
we'll
just,
take last year's and change the numbers as appropriate.
it's just a nice guideline, too. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah,
you
yeah.
can change it up however you feel,
No, I
but this is
understand.
just, it makes it everything easier if you understand what it was.
Explain like the ESSER funding and all that.
Right,
So we'll
right,
change it.
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. I mean, occasionally things pop up that are, people are more concerned about, and we really don't have any issues like that involve, a deep dive into, yeah, like, the Stevens estate, and, those sorts of things are like how, we just don't seem to have anything really big like that. The biggest thing I was gonna say is the, Community Preservation Committee, their recommendations, and if we wanted to write something about that, and I don't even know if that's necessary, because
Maybe explaining the bonding though, and like.
That's not a bad
the fact
idea.
that it's not
Yeah,
going to hurt
perhaps-
us for our bond rating and
Perhaps that's a good idea.
I mean,
something like
using
that.
Yeah.
recurring funds like that really leverages the amount of money you have to spend
Yeah.
tremendously.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that makes sense personally.
Yeah, no, I do too, because I had thought before, I had mentioned it before,
Yeah, yeah.
should we have some sort of, I mean, although I gotta tell you, I'm probably not the best person to write and explain the bond, but it doesn't matter, we can find someone to do that.
There are plenty of people around here that can do that.
Yeah, somebody smarter than me. But yeah, I like that a lot, and just have it, I think even going forward, it should always be a consideration,
It's
because
financial.
it's financial, and it's a, not nothing, it's a significant
million
portion
dollars.
of our,
Yeah.
of our tax dollars, you
Yeah.
know? And the more we get people engaged, the more they pay attention to like, wow, this is really cool what we do with this money, to put it appropriately. I mean, it is, it's amazing.
Well, I remember years ago reading something comparing a couple of states. I think it might have been California and Texas. For whatever reason, they picked those two, I think just to be ideologically.
Yeah.
But anyway, one state, people felt that their tax dollars were going for things they could see, they could touch.
Right.
And in another state, they weren't so sure where the money was going. And there was a huge difference in their tolerance of increased taxes or taxation in general. When people can actually see
Yeah.
where the money is going.
Yeah, this is what we're paid, and this is
Don't we
what
always
we're
hear, I
getting.
mean, people say, well, where's all the money going? I mean, we're in the finance, you hear this from other people.
Yeah.
Where's all the money go?
That's right. Yeah, because it seems like a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. Anything else anybody wants to chat about? Any questions about anything? No? Okay, well then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Moved by Regina, second, and all in favor? Aye. All right, folks.